Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine Torres-Allen, and this is New Hampshire Family Now,
a show about building family in the Granite State. Today in the pod, Director of Impact Becky Berk helps us understand the difference between at-risk and vulnerable circumstances, and then we play Messing with Becky one last time. Today's show was brought to you by Service Credit Union. You go beyond for your family. That's why Service Credit Union goes beyond for you. Get more for your money, reach milestones sooner, and plan for the future you've earned. Service Credit Union will support you every step of the way to go further than you ever imagined. If you're driven to go beyond, you belong with Service Credit Union. Visit servicecu.org to start your journey today. This podcast was also brought to you by Family Support New Hampshire. Family Support New Hampshire is NH's coalition of family resource centers and family strengthening programs that exist to ensure Granite State families have access to resources so both caregivers and children can succeed, because supported families are strong families. To find a family resource center near you, visit www.fsnh.org. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today on the show, I'm thrilled to welcome back guest co-host, NHCT Director of Impact, Becky Berk, who, as we know, eats data for breakfast, and who is trading all of it for a big floppy hat, sunglasses, and Allagash white.
Oh, yeah. Actually, in that order. Yes. You got it right.
Now, I know you told me not to mention this, but you are retiring, so I wanted to say congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been an honor and a privilege.
Well, this is your second, as you call it, tour of duty. So I'm curious from your lens, how has this organization changed?
So when I came back for my second tour, as I like to call it, it was an entirely different organization, different structure, different staffing.
Right.
Other than the mission, it might as well have been an entirely different organization. And I think much better positioned to move the needle.
Yeah. So in your time then, and maybe this applies to the second tour, what are you most proud of?
So I think I am most proud of the fact that the Family Resource Centers as a group and the family support field in New Hampshire has some really essential common elements, including, surprise, surprise, you're going to be astonished when I say one of those is data.
Yes.
And, as I often have said, data is not a four-letter word, although it is. But having that common agreement in the field and being able to uphold and uplift and celebrate the work of the Family Resource Centers in a more coherent, consistent way, I think has been great. And I've been so privileged to be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. This is a common vista from which to view certain either issues, challenges, opportunities, data-driven decision-making, alterations of service and service delivery. All of that, I think, wraps in. And we kind of see, I think, data as a certain truth. But I think the way we use it in and around people is interesting. And I'm thinking specifically about Dr. Renee Branch Kennedy in the Michigan Public Health Institute, when she took great pains in a conversation I had with her to not talk about at-risk populations, but to talk about vulnerable circumstances. But when we talk about at-risk populations, to your mind, what is it we are talking about?
Well, that's a really interesting question, right? Because by definition, when you're talking about a population of people, you're choosing one or more characteristics.
Right.
Those characteristics may be in common to that population routinely and consistently, and they may not. So when we talk about at-risk families, at-risk people, fragile families, right? We're talking about the characteristics of that person or of the family unit. And I think what we lose whenever we do that is understanding the context in which that individual or family is operating.
Right.
And I think that's so much of the push that we've been kind of on this path of more considering the ecosystem. I think so many more organizations are looking at communities in the ecosystem and what is the context in which individuals and families feel accepted, feel seen, feel supported, whether or not they ask for help.
Right.
So all of that is is really part of the lens that we need to look through when we're defining what this term at risk is, because we know that there are people and families who on paper, you look at everything, all the challenges they face, and they fall into an at risk from the data only. And then you look at the actual person or the actual family, and they are so resilient and they are thriving.
Yeah, I think that opportunity to identify targeted intervention, so to create resilience, is there. The danger being the association you create by targeting, right? It becomes part of your framing. This population, you're starting to use non-human centered descriptors, right? But conversely, when we talk about vulnerable circumstances, what are we talking about there?
So vulnerable circumstances can be any situation that an individual or a family does not feel prepared to meet and doesn't feel like they have the support to figure it out.
Right.
And that can be anybody, right? It was really interesting when the pandemic first hit, there was a lot of conversation around lots of people losing their livelihoods or losing their jobs. And the families that often struggled the most in that circumstance were families who had never had significant struggles or hurdles to meet. And you don't know where to start because you've never been in this circumstance before. So do you define that family as a vulnerable family? Well, no, you wouldn't. But in the context of what they're being presented with and what they have to figure out how to navigate, it's huge for them, which is why, again, I think that we at the Children's Trust and many others often come back to this concept that support should be universal. Right? If you're a family, if you're a parent, if you're a caregiver, it doesn't matter when or where or how, you will need support at some point. And instead of trying to figure out who those people are and get the supports to them just in time, or in most cases, just after everything has fallen apart, right? So if we say as a society, as a state, as a nation, whatever it is, if we say that we truly value families and children, then you value them from the beginning in whatever context they're in. You don't say, well, we value families and children, but we don't need to do anything to support them. But when they fall apart, we'll give them some support if they meet XYZQ, eligibility requirements, right? No.
Yeah. Well, let's take a short break, but when we come back, we'll have more with Director of Impact, Becky Berk. Don't go anywhere. Today's show was brought to you by Bank of New Hampshire. For 193 years, Bank of New Hampshire has put customers and communities first. With the expertise to help you realize your goals, their technology makes banking easier, and the friendly faces will make you want to visit in person. Want a bank that has your back? Bank of New Hampshire are your people. For more information, visit bnh.bank or call 1-800-832-0912. Member FDIC. Today's podcast was brought to you by Dartmouth Health Children's. As the only comprehensive pediatric healthcare system in the region, Dartmouth Health Children's promotes health, advances knowledge, and delivers the best patient and family-centered care for infants, children, and adolescents. Shared knowledge from expert providers across the system increases their ability to care for patients and families close to home. From annual checkups to specialized treatments, Dartmouth Health Children's is dedicated to ensuring all children live their happiest, healthiest lives. For more information, visit childrensdartmouthhealth.org. That's childrens.dartmouth-health.org. Today's show was also brought to you by NFI North. For more than 40 years, NFI North has served as an indispensable nonprofit resource for delivering mental and behavioral health care services to children, adults, seniors, and families across Maine and New Hampshire. To learn more, visit nfinorth.com. And now, back to our conversation with Becky Berk.
We'll give them some support if they meet XYZQ, eligibility requirements, right? No.
Right. And I think this is part of the narrative shift that we're trying to engage in, is this idea, you take a family in a vulnerable circumstance, you put them in a well-resourced community, they do beautifully.
They do great. Absolutely, right.
And so then this separates out in this narrative change that we're after. It is not the characteristics characteristic of the grouping that has caused the resource deficit in the community. Right? It is the circumstance itself in one way or another. And now we get into certain things like, environmental justice and different resource allocation.
And policy.
Right, because this all comes back to policy. So I guess my question in this then is, given your position as the Director of Impact in overseeing the FSDS or Family Support Data System, for which you have great pride, what does our current circumstance look like then for families in New Hampshire right now?
I think that we would be in such a better, I think we as a state and we as a country would be in such a better place if we thought about cross boundaries. And what I mean when I say that is, well, I'm going to give you an individual example. And then
it's my favorite Becky Berk example.
So when we talk about children, for instance, right, we follow a child and they cross boundaries every day. They cross the boundary from home to school to community to friend to community group back to home. Mm-hmm. So to what extent are the kinds of supports or appreciations for that child consistent, and how much communication is there between those sectors or those parts of a child's life? So that's one kind of cross-boundary piece. The other piece is that, again, not only do we classify or define people and families, we also classify or define entire communities. That is often just by the name of the town. And I guarantee you, if you rattle off the names of some towns, people immediately have a pretty visceral reaction of what that town must be like based on reputation of resources, of the type of people who live there, of the size of the houses, the quality of the school system, all of those pieces. So from that context, how are we doing as a state? I think we're not doing well enough as a state until we can look out across the landscape and say, you know what? It doesn't matter which child it is, in which family or family structure they're in, or which town they live in, they all have equitable access to what they need to thrive.
Right.
That's when we know we've got it. Are we there? No. Are we getting closer?
We better be. Every day we better be.
The conversation is beginning to shift, and I think it is beginning to take some of those other pieces into consideration, but are we there yet? No.
Right. Well, that is kind of that definition of public health, making the healthy wellness option easy and providing access to it. Mm-hmm. So I think, though, that it comes back to this kind of joint narrative that we have, and I talk about this a lot. It's this kind of bootstraps mentality, right? When we look at populations, even when we look at communities, look at families and in terms of their success or failure, depending on who they are as people.
On who they are as people. Right. You just nailed it on the head. On who they are as people. We judge whether they're successful or not, individuals and families, based on who they are as people and families. We do not necessarily judge or take action to correct the circumstances in which they live,
right,
which can allow them to thrive or not.
Exactly. But that means then we have to value everyone.
Bingo.
So it sounds from that laugh then like you are ready to play.
Oh, dear.
Messing with Becky Berk, who likes data better than people. Way better.
I should have guessed. Of course, I should have guessed. Yes.
Here are the rules. I give you 3 scenarios, and you tell me if you will reconsider your retirement. So, scenario 1, we reduce your office hours by half, but we double the amount of time when you can tell it like it is. Would you consider staying?
No, because I always feel like I've always told it like it is. So that is not any additional benefit. I feel like one of the things that I typically, whether other people think it's true or not, I have always felt like I can speak truth to power, and I say what I want to say, and I can express my opinion, and sometimes it's forceful and sometimes it's wrong, and I'm totally open to that.
Well, when you have a quiver of data and a bag of no F's to give. Scenario 2.
Yes.
We invest in a limited edition Becky Berk size Power Wheels, royal blue, so you can ride this into staff meetings. Would you consider staying?
No.
That was so sharp. So scenario 3, we let you know how incredibly important you are to the Children's Trust and its mission. And then you let me touch your face.
Well, thank you. And I think, this organization is blessed with a very strong team and a very strong group of family resource centers around the state. So I am leaving feeling like I have done my part, and that the work will carry on, and it will carry on in a wonderful way. And if families feel more supported and if children thrive, we are all going to be so much better off in the decades and centuries ahead. So,
well, Becky Berk, I'm going to miss you.
I'm going to miss you also, Nathan.
Hi, this is Natalie Gagnon. The thing that Becky has taught me is that data is everywhere in the universe.
Hi, this is Jen, and one thing that Becky Berk taught me was how to make a killer Excel spreadsheet.
Hey, it's Liz. Becky has taught me that everyone has hidden talents and interests that can surprise and inspire us.
Hi, my name is Carol. W. Edwards Deming said, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." I usually try and shy away from the numbers, but Becky has shown me just how important and impactful data can be.
Hi, this is Tracy Ferguson. One thing that Becky has taught me is that if you don't get an answer right away, ask again. And if you don't get an answer then, walk in the room.
Hi, this is Deanna. One thing that Becky has taught me is that there is no such thing as too many questions.
This is Kathy. As someone who usually looks at things a little bit differently, has a different background, has different experiences, and has a different lens, I've just really come to appreciate the viewpoint that Becky brings.
And many thanks to the Office of Social and Emotional Wellness, or OSEW, at the NH Department of Education for sponsoring this podcast. OSEW's mission is to advance youth social emotional wellness by collaborating with federal, state, community, and family partners to implement evidence-based, data-driven, preventative, and responsive approaches to lifelong social emotional skills for New Hampshire's students. To learn more about the Department of Education, visit www.education.nh.gov. Merrimack County Savings Bank, where Merrimack style is treating everyone with care, respect, and compassion, proudly supports the mission and efforts of New Hampshire Children's Trust. Founded in 1867, the Merrimack has served people, businesses, nonprofits, and municipalities in central and southern New Hampshire for over 157 years. Visit local offices in Bow, Concord, Contoocook, Hooksett, Nashua, and Wyndham, or go to themerrimack.com. New Hampshire Family Now is listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or ask your smart speaker to play New Hampshire Family Now.